What's up, everybody? My name's Big Cam and welcome back to another Comically Boston breakdown episode, and today we are talking about Alien Earth episode 6 titled The Fly. And today we'll be breaking down and talking everything that we need to know about episode 6. And previously, coming off of episode 5 last week, we learned what happened to the Maginot spaceship and how it crashed and how those aliens got loose, and that Boy Cavalier knew the whole time that the ship was going to crash in his city, and he was actually planning this with one of the crew members. So, we saw all that happen, and we saw how Morrow is going to get those species back for Yutani, and she gave him the green light for anything that he needs. So, we saw the xenomorph get loose and take out pretty much the entire spacecraft, the Teocellus fucking things up, the tick things messing people up last episode. So, we saw all that happened and how it connected to the brief bit of the ship crashing that we saw with Morrow in the crew cockpit, telling Mother that the crew is dead and that nobody's going to survive as that poor woman gets ripped apart by the xenomorph outside the door. And then we saw Morrow in the Yutani penthouse looking out over the city, and that's kind of where we left off the credits of last episode. But we opened this episode, of course, with the Alien Earth intro card, and this time it showed us, I believe this is the island, like Neverland Island, or, wherever the Prodigy City Island is. This is what that island is, I believe. And other than that, they showed us shots of Wendy petting the little snake xenomorph that we seen in episode 4 at the end, where episode 5 was like a flashback, so we're kind of continuing on, since episode 4 with this episode 6. And episode 5 just gave us, a little bit more of a flashback to what happened to the ship and why Yutani maybe wants to keep these species secret and, doesn't want Boy Cavalier to get his hands on them, but too late for that. And we also remember from episode 4 in the intro card cutting between these things, Nibs being crazy a couple episodes ago, thinking she was pregnant, and them taking her back to her room and thinking about wiping her memory type shit. And the alien octopus eyeball creature took over that goat, so he's still in the goat as far as we know. And we had saw that the baby xenomorph had bursted out of Joe's lung that they had taken out of him and replaced with a new one. But, this xenomorph seems to be, like this little snake creature at the end of 4, and then as this episode starts, it starts to grow, and any Alien fans know that those xenomorphs grow really quickly and get real big real fast. But we opened this episode on Wendy seeing how the xenomorph is growing in the lab, and she's still trying to communicate with it, and we can see that this is like a infant toddler stage for this xenomorph, where normally we don't see this stage. We normally just see like the chest burster hatch, and then it, hides for a little bit, and then all of a sudden it comes back and it's ginormous. But because they're studying it and it's locked in a cell, we're getting to see, the stages of this thing growing and how fast it grows. But, it's like not the snake-like creature like it was within the last episode, and now it's got legs and starting to grow arms and starting to take form, but it's still quite small. But it still, as she's trying to communicate with it, jumps at her out the glass. And it's like, oh boy, so this thing, is she going to be the queen mother and learn how to communicate with it and then be boys with the aliens? Or does it not matter and these things are just killing machines and want to kill anything that moves? And as Wendy's in the lab looking at the xenomorph, the Teocellus taking over the goat, and the alien eyeball creature's real name is the Teocellus, I believe, but I think I'm just going to keep calling it the alien eyeball octopus thing. But at least for now, it's just the goat because it's in the goat. But the goat's like looking around and like figuring out what's going on in this area and trying to, figure out a way out of this place. And he like looks, and we see that there's the cell next to him. It has like this giant weird nest in the top corner of like the container. Like these creatures are making like a beehive or some type of, moth nest or something, whatever, it's kind of how it looks to me. But it's like this creepy weird thing in the corner, and it sees, the nest, and we're kind of like, oh boy, so that's what the title of this episode is, The Fly. That's like, you know, what this episode is pretty much about, is teaching us and showing us this yet another one of these species that we haven't really seen. So I think this makes 4, which means there's still another species that we haven't seen, you know. So very creepy, the flies, but we'll talk more about them in a bit. We see Joe is talking to Kirsch, and he thinks one day Wendy will graduate, and then, you know, she'll be able to leave, and he will be able to take care of her. And Kirsch tells him that's like an onion taking care of a star. She has the capability to live for thousands of years and do space travel, and you want her to be a family? And Joe says she's just a kid, and Kirsch just looks at him and goes, keep telling yourself that. Oh, I've really been loving Timothy Oliphant's Kirsch. His character is just so good, and I really want to see more of him, and I hope he's bigger in these last 3 episodes. But anytime we cut over to him and just his delivery and like just how android his character does feel, you know, he's doing a very good job to make him feel cold and heartless and have zero humanity, and he is just fully robot, you know what I mean? So then we cut over to the 2 doctors, that couple we learned a couple episodes back that they're married, and I believe they're Dr. Sylvia and Arthur and whatever her name is. I still haven't caught her name, but I think it's Dr. Sylvia is their like last name, if they both have the same last name. At least Arthur is Dr. Sylvia as far as I know. But the 2 doctors are running tests on Nibs and, you know, trying to figure out why she thinks she's pregnant and what corrupted data she has that's making her, you know, crazy. And the bald guy there says to wipe her memory, and they're like, yo, this could change her fundamentally and change her personality, and like we don't know how this will impact her personality. And the male doctor disobeys and says he won't do it, and, you know, Arthur's like, I won't do it. And he's like, oh, then you're fired. And the wife says that she can do it, and he's like, do you need your husband to do this? And she says no. And the bald guy fires Arthur and says, if you're still here at the end of the day, you will be trespassing and maybe shot. So, you know, Arthur's got to get out of here, and he's fired. He kind of quit, but like, you know, he doesn't want to do this bullshit for Prodigy fucking with these kids, and, you know, like, this is not what we do, you know, like, and he's refusing to do something. So now he's fired, and if he's still there by the end of the day, he will not only be arrested for trespassing, but he might just be shot instead. You're like, oof. Wendy, we then hear, is pretty close to figuring out communication with the xenomorphs. And Joe says, don't give them humanity, those things are killers. And she's like, so are we. And she's not wrong. And then, you know, as they're talking, she's like, this place is a yes place, not a no place. And I just like that mindset of things. Like, anytime you say no, you know, you're just shutting it off and canceling it and just being like, no. It's so final. It's so just like, negative, no. Where yes is like, yeah, yes and, improv, yes and. I want yes people around me. Not just like, yes, you're great. But like, hey, does that sound like a good idea? Yeah, and we could do this. Yeah, that, and we could do that, and this. Yeah, you know, like, I would rather have somebody explore and want to like keep going further. The worst thing you could do for any human, you know, or, you know, like, particularly an actor, in the sense of like, you know, one of these actors on the show. If you're an actor, you walk up to the director and you're like, hey, is this what you want? Is this blah, blah, blah? And then you just go, no. You know, the actor's going to feel discouraged and be like, oh shit, well, now I did everything wrong, you know, now I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. And now you go out there and then you're nervous, you're self-conscious, you're in your own head, and you don't perform the way you're supposed to be performing. Where if you walked over and even if you were dead wrong, the director goes, yeah, but why don't you try it like this, and what if this, and yeah, and do that too, and yeah, do this as well, you know, like, and they keep you positive, but they don't discourage you, and they keep the mindset flowing. You don't want to stop the creative flow because you poo-pooed some idea. Like, you want to be the person that, you know, you have an idea, yes and, yeah, keep it going. Don't know things. And this is a yes place here at Prodigy facility, even though, you know, here it might not be such a positive thing. You know, like, the yes place here is like, sometimes you should say no, and it's like, he's like, nope, yep, we're gonna test it anyways, we're here to do science. And it's like, no, we should wait. Yes, we're doing it. You know, it's like, alright, well, Prodigy and Boy Cavalier might not be the best person to head this project. You know, he seems a little too quick to the punch type of thing. You know, like, he's rambunctious little kid, and he's like, doesn't have time to sit and wait. He's like ready to go, you know? Joe tells Wendy that he's working on a way to get them out of here. And she says, what if I don't want to leave? So Joe's now sitting there like, what do you mean you don't want to leave? Like, I'm trying to figure out a way to get the hell out of here. Get away from these monsters, get away from Prodigy, get away from Boy Cavalier. And now Wendy doesn't want to leave, so, you know, what's going to happen here? Everyone's just going to die on this island? No one's going to make it out alive? Like, I hope some of these characters make it out alive. But at the same time, like, we know that these characters don't necessarily come back in the future unless, you know, they come back in an Alien Earth related project. But, like, out of all of the other Alien movies, these characters don't return. So maybe this season is pretty final. And what I was saying, this whole series breakdown, in my theory, is that by the end of this series, they will bomb Neverland Island and Prodigy Island to contain the specimens so that they don't, you know, get loose on Earth and infect the whole Earth, you know what I mean? Like, maybe that's why Prodigy isn't a thing in the future and Weyland-Yutani is, because Prodigy gets bombed because they had an alien outbreak, you know, that type of thing. But then we hear an Alt J song, and I really love Alt J as a band, and this song, Tesselites, I believe it's called, as we cut over to Yutani and Boy Cavalier having a sit-down negotiation type of meeting about the crashed ship, and, you know, Boy's got his feet on the table, and there's like, you know, there's Boy as the head of Prodigy, Yutani as the head of Yutani, and then they have like a mediator type of thing that represents the Five, which is the 5 corporations that run Earth. And Yutani and Prodigy are one of them. I believe Weyland's one of them, and then there's 2 more there would be. But, you know, in the very, very distant future, it's just Weyland and Yutani, and they joined companies into that Weyland-Yutani logo rather than just Yutani and Weyland being separate companies. So the mediator's like, you know, I hope you guys are being very serious, you know, and taking this serious. And Boy Cavalier's like, yeah, sure. But he's got his feet on the table, and as she starts talking, he's not being serious at all. And I loved this Twitter picture. And it's, you know, Boy Cavalier with his dirty feet. He's got them spread on either side of the table. And, you know, the center of frame is his 2 feet with him in the middle. And the person just captioned it, Alien Earth is fucking crazy for this. And they are, you know, I really thought that was a hilarious picture. But, you know, Boy's got his feet on the table. He's not taking this very, you know, seriously. And then as she's speaking and giving you her side of the story, he's like, can we just skip all this? I'm from the future and we move fast there. So can we, you know, and he's not respecting the room at all. But he's kind of got all the power in his hands. So, you know, he takes command of the room, and, you know, he has what she wants and is able to work out a deal for $20 billion. And she's like, 10, and he goes, 20. So she goes, 15, and he goes, 25, and she goes, 20 it is. You know, so like, you know, normally it's like 10, 20, 15, and then it's like 17, 5, you know, and then they end up in the middle of that number is what negotiations normally are. But because Boy has all the power here, she says, you know, 10, 20, they meet in the, she meets him in the middle at 15, thinking that this should be done. He goes 25. You know, he raises his price because she tried to half off him at his ass. So finally she's like, okay, 20 bill. And he goes, great. So 20 billion plus damages, and, you know, and you can have your ship back once I figure out how to take it out of my building without it collapsing. And I'm sure you'll be sending a bunch of apologies for the lives lost in this crash that you caused. And yeah, after the mandatory 6-week quarantine, she's like, no, they're not your creatures. And she's like, well, they're living creatures, so they don't belong to anybody, really. But I believe the you know, there's some type of accord that the world has set up that off-planet species have a 6-week quarantine. So now Boy has $20 billion plus damages, and he gets to keep the creatures for a 6-week quarantine period, still to study them before he has to give them back to Yutani. And she offers $50 billion just to get them back now, and he doesn't take it because he wants to study the creatures. And also he's probably trying to figure out in that 6-week period to try and get rid of Yutani or something like that, you know what I mean? But Yutani, as Boy Cavalier leaves, Yutani asks Moro, her head of security, where are we? And Moro says he could have a xenomorph by the end of the day, and she goes, could. And, you know, so that's through slightly, he could, you know, he goes, it's too many variables, it could not work, but it also could work. So we could have a xenomorph by the end of the day. But she goes, what do you recommend? And he recommends to destabilize the facility and exfil in the chaos. And Yutani just kind of nods in approval to make this happen. So it seems like Moro is getting troops together, and he's going to go destabilize the Prodigy facility and then exfil in the chaos. So the remaining 2 episodes are about to be crazy. But as Moro is leaving, Kirsch gets in the elevator with him at the last second, you know, sticks his hand in the door to make sure that he makes it. And Moro and him start shit-talking each other. And Kirsch is like, look at you, the half-human. And Moro is like, you're yesterday's model. What's it like to be obsolete? And they're like taunting each other back and forth. And Moro ends it with, I'll see you soon, old toy. And they are great together. I love Moro as the cyborg for Yutani. And he's like half human, but he's really, you know, machine. And he's like cold just for Yutani. And then the cold machine for Prodigy is Kirsch. And, you know, he's the synthetic for Prodigy. And I was like, seeing those 2 characters on screen together, which we only really had one other scene earlier in the season where they were together, having this little elevator scene was so good. I loved those 2 actors together, and these characters were so good and like so bitter and cold but quippy and smart. So like the actors there, I don't know the actor for Moro's name, but he's really been great this whole season. But we cut back to Nibs getting her memories erased by the female doctor, and she ends up waking up back in her room, and she's talking to Wendy, and she's like, God, I feel like I've been asleep for 100 years. And Wendy's trying to talk to her about what happened over the last couple of days and see if she's all right. You know, you were talking about being pregnant, like I'm just trying to see if you're okay. And Wendy is, you know, doing the exact opposite for what Nibs needs in this current moment, and she's like freaking her out all over again because she's like trying to talk to her about these memories that now Nibs doesn't have. You know, she had those memories erased. She's like, why don't I have those anymore? And this is like freaking her out all over again. And Wendy's like confused, like what happened to poor Nibs? Like, you can just delete my memories if you wanted to. Like, we're not humans to you guys. We're just the toys, you know? Like, she's starting to figure it out. So I think poor Nibs, you know, she walks away from Nibs at this point. I think Nibs is going to be real fucked up. Or she could actually be pregnant. I think there's still a theory out there that, like, you know, a xenomorph or something could have impregnated her in her stomach or something. Or, I don't know. Maybe she's not pregnant. Maybe she was just losing her mind. But either way, I think Nibs is going to be a problem these last 2 episodes. We then cut over to Slightly, and he's like in the woods, and he's talking to, you know, Moro, and he's like, leave me alone. And then Shmi walks up and kind of scares him, and he's like, you want to have some fun? He's like, no, I'm busy. And he's like, oh God, everyone's so cranky around here. Nobody wants to have fun anymore. And Slightly's like, you know, not everything's about having fun. We're adults now. And poor Shmi's like, being adults suck. And then Shmi walks over and, like, you know, gives Slightly a hug when Slightly's like, it's okay, buddy. We'll hang out after this. We'll have fun. We'll do that. And he's like, really? You know, you want to be my friend still? You're not mad at me? So it seems like Shmi and Slightly were the 2 kids of the group, but Slightly has quickly matured when his family was threatened and, you know, doing this job for Moro. So poor Slightly's like really stressed out right now, and Smee is still like this kid in his mind, you know what I mean? He seems like the one that is definitely the most kid-like still. And he walks up and gives Slightly a little hug, but we cut over to see Slightly trying to get Joe over to the egg like Moro wants him to. And he's like trying to convince him to get with him. And we can hear Moro in his ear like, just tell him, come with me now. You're running out of time. And, you know, Slightly's trying to do this, but he's not doing exactly what Moro said. So it's not working as good as it might. And, you know, either way, Joe's like, what's going on with you, Slightly? You're acting real weird. Are you all right? And one of Joe's security buddies comes in and says, hey, they're 1 short for a security detail and they need his help. So, you know, they indirectly save Joe's life, because if he went with Slightly, that would have been real bad for Joe. But we see Joe and his friends on a very rainy patrol mission, and Joe's asking them about, yeah, have you seen boats? And one of the guys is like, yeah, there's a boat dock that way if you follow this trail. And, you know, the other girl that's with them, and I thought that this was kind of his girlfriend, but maybe just a friend that was in the patrol unit with them. And his girl there says, whatever you're planning, stop it. You're asking questions about boat docks and paths out of here, like, If any of us had boating experience, like, whatever you're planning, stop it. Don't mess this up. We get paid. And Joe's like, you know, but there's monsters here. And she says, yeah, well, at least I know where they are. And it's like, yeah, you know, I kind of agree with her. It's like, listen, would you rather know there are monsters or that there aren't monsters? And if there are, would you rather know that those monsters are real and not know where they are? Or would you rather know that they're real, they're dangerous, but they're in that room over there? You know what I mean? Like, there's something about monster films when you don't know where it is. It's very spooky. It's very scary. You don't want to be around. You're crawling in your own skin. But when you're like, the monster's in that room right over there and he's locked in, not that scary. It's just like, hey, don't go in that room. Like, if you go in that room, some bad shit's gonna happen. But, you know, stay clear. You'll be fine. We cut back over to Wendy trying to communicate with the xenomorph. He's getting bigger and bigger, and this is just getting wilder and wilder as I'm seeing this thing growing, and it's like taking more and more shape of the xenomorph that we know and love. And Kirsch calls in on his flight back from the mainland back to the Neverland Island, and Kirsch calls Isaac, or Toodles, but Isaac is his new name, and he calls him to start working on the next experiment in the lab, and tells him to be very careful, and tells him to feed the animals and, you know, follow the scientific, you know, theory to the T. You know, it's not for guessing, or, you know, it's not a suggestion box. You're supposed to follow it to a T. It's the method for a reason. So Isaac starts to go feed these alien creatures, and he's bringing the food to each of them, and one of the food chamber doors falls off, and it's for the flies or the alien bugs that we haven't seen, but we see the nest up in the corner there. So Isaac thinks it's a bright idea to just open the main door and drop in the food himself. Why not? You know, like, dumbass idea. He's like carefully trying to put the food down inside the chamber, and as he's putting the food down, he's like looking up at the, you know, the bug nest and seeing if the flies are about to start coming out of there. And as he's like looking at it, the goat, or the alien eyeball octopus creature thing, headbutts the glass, and now, you know, Isaac looks at the goat and distracts him just for a moment, and one of the alien flies is able to creep up onto the ceiling above him and, you know, get out of the nest, and then all of a sudden the creature lands on his arm and, you know, with a big long creepy tongue licks his arm, and then like fills up its chest or cheeks, and then spits like this venom acid at Isaac, and he immediately starts to bleed, you know, the white synthetic blood, and starts, you know, spitting up white synthetic blood, falls to the ground, and is stuck inside, you know, so he's like dead, but he's stuck inside the fly's tank. So as the fly, or the goat, headbutted the glass and distracted him, the door shut behind him. So now the food's in there, but Isaac is stuck in the fly's tank, getting his face eaten apart by these freaking weird alien things. And I couldn't find like a picture of the bug itself, but it's okay because the bug itself was creepy. But poor Isaac here, the synthetic, just totally just white body, which he could get rebuilt theoretically, but in this current moment, deuces, poor death to Isaac. But as the bug alien fly things start to eat apart Isaac's face, the goat creature is looking on, and he seems very happy with himself. And I was just like, oh god, this creature's way too intelligent. Like, he's so much scarier. The T.S. Ellis, so much scarier than the xenomorph. He really is. We then see Wendy goes and asks the lady doctor what she did to Nibs, and why doesn't she remember anything about what we did this last week. So, has it been 1 week since all of the other hybrids got put on, you know, activated and born, if you would? And, you know, it's been a week since the crash, you know what I mean, that type of thing? Or has it been a week since Wendy was born? Because we did see Wendy get turned into a synth at the beginning of this series. But I'm thinking it's been, you know, because of the way that they were saying lines in this episode, I'm thinking it's been 2 years since Wendy was made into a hybrid, but maybe only a week for the rest of these hybrids since they've been born, or it's just been a week since the crash. But either way, you know, poor Nibs doesn't remember anything from what happened during this week, and the doctor tells her that she gave her medicine, but we know that she wiped those memories. But the doctor, she's like, I gave her medicine just like any other doctor would. And she says, you've been in the lab a lot lately talking, trying to talk to those aliens. And, Wendy's like, yeah, someone has to watch them. They didn't ask to be here. And the doctor says, they're specimens. This is a research facility. And she's like, they're specimens just like us. And she's like, Wendy, you're not a specimen. And Wendy's like, that's not my name. And so she's like, Marcy, come on. And she just doesn't want to be a person anymore if this is what people are, and she wants to be like what Kirsch said and see the world for what it is and not how it feels. Ooh. And the doctor's like, Wendy, Marcy, whatever, you gotta talk to me, you gotta tell me what's wrong and so I can help you. And Wendy, or Marcy now, says, what if you're what's wrong? Ooh. So yeah, bitch, like Wendy's finally, screw these scientists, screw Prodigy, screw these doctors. It seems like Wendy's had enough, and maybe she does want to leave. Where at the beginning of this episode, she was like, I like it here. I'm talking to the alien creatures. Yeah, and Joe's like, I think we got to get the fuck out of here. So maybe she'll go back to Joe next episode and be like, hey, we got to get out of here. Like, we got to get the fuck out of Dodge. But we cut over to Joe asking the male doctor, Arthur, Sylvia, asking him if his sister is safe here. And the doctor looks at the security camera, then looks back at him, and he's like, yeah, she's safe. Safe as a safe in a bank, she's completely safe. And he plays along, so that the cameras don't hear him telling Joe things that he's not supposed to be hearing. But then he goes, yeah, come over here, I'll show you on the computer. And he types a message onto the computer trying to help Joe escape, and he writes the boat dock codes on the computer, and then brings him to another computer and shows him turn off the trackers for the hybrids. And Joe's like, yeah. So he turns off the Wendy's tracker in it, but I also think the trackers to all the other hybrids as well. And Joe's like, thank you, and he shakes his hand and leaves. And the doctor sees a message pop up on the computers, and it says Toodles tracker isn't responding. And he's like, but how could that be? It's because his responder is in his head probably, and that's getting melted by bug acid or getting eaten away by those alien bugs or something at the current moment. But Toodles, or Isaac, because that was his original name, Isaac's tracker isn't responding. So the doctor's like, oh shit, I gotta go figure out why that isn't responding. I just turned them off. They should be off. Why is this, still activated but not responding, turning off? That's not right. So he goes to investigate what happened to poor Isaac. As we cut over to Slightly crying, sitting outside the lab, and he's talking to Morrow, just give me one more chance, I'll try. And he's like, do you want to talk to your mother before I kill her? And he's like, no, I'll try, just give me one more chance. And I'm like, poor Morrow. I mean, poor Slightly. Morrow's fucking with this poor kid. God damn, poor Slightly. That poor bastard just needs a break, But as he's sitting there, the doctor, Arthur, comes around the corner, and they run into the lab to see, Toodles' body on the ground inside the bug's container. And Arthur runs over and starts pulling the body out, and he looks up and sees the bug's nest, and he starts to panic a little bit, and he's like, Slightly, help me get this body out of here. But Slightly is opening up the door to the xenomorph eggs instead, and the doctor is human, so the eggs start to open and hatch. And I'm like, oh no, I thought this was going to be Joe that got, face huggered, but it's going to be this poor doctor guy, Arthur, who just got fired or quit and is supposed to be leaving, but he just cares about these kids too much, so he checked on Isaac, and now it's going to be the last thing he ever does. So now there's a face hugger on the loose, and Slightly has locked the door, so he locked Arthur in there, and Slightly, the goat, and the xenomorph are all looking on as poor Dr. Sylvia gets face huggered. And you're like, oh no, poor bastard. But now, there's a xenomorph in the tank, and now there's a face hugger onto this guy's face. So now there's going to be a second xenomorph bursting out of this guy's chest any moment, right? Or, next episode. But we see that Kirsch is watching the security tapes on his little iPad thing, and he sees all of this go down, and Boyd looks at him and goes, everything good? And he goes, affirmative, right? So he's like, everything's fine. everything is definitely not fine, Kirsch, but he just doesn't care to tell Boy. We then see Slightly walks back into this room where now the Bug cell is open and now there's a face hugger on this guy, and he drags the body over to the like air vents and stuffs the body in and then gets in after it. So he's gonna drag this body through the air vents somewhere for Morrow for next episode. But as he's like closing the air vent, we see the alien bug creature flying over, and I thought it was gonna last second squeeze its way through and, you know, start messing up Slightly the same way it messed up Isaac. But the bugs are trapped in the lab still, but not trapped in their rooms. So now they're, you know, they're freely roaming about the lab. So anybody that comes in there next is going to have to deal with the xenomorph eggs chamber being opened and these alien bug flies flying around the lab. Now, if you're Kirsch, you probably don't care. You just walk in, shut the container for the eggs, and, you know, deal with the flies and get them out of there and hopefully not die yourself in the process like Isaac did. But if you're Joe and you walk in, now another one of those xenomorph eggs starts hatching and you still have to deal with the flies, you know, like, so pretty crazy. And that xenomorph is in one of those cells getting fuller and fuller in size and getting bigger and bigger by the second, you know, like, so this is all bad in all the ways. But poor Slightly's, you know, got to bring this body through the vents and bring it to Morrow for him somehow. And he's doing all of this to save his family, which I think Morrow has already killed his mother. So it's going to be like real sad when we figure out like Slightly's like, yo, I did everything you asked. Here it is. Just don't hurt my mother. And he's like, oh, sorry, kid. Your mother's dead. She's been dead. Long time dead. Ever since the moment I let you talk to her. The moment we hung up, I killed her. And it's going to be like one of those. And you're just going to be like, well, Morrow, you were a good character. Now I hope you get devastatingly eaten alive. You know, like a acid burned to death by one of those xenomorphs. Like something terrible if he did kill Slightly's mother. Arush sing, Arush what? You know, one of the funniest lines in the show. So then we see the Teocellus in the goat body is, you know, looking around at the xenomorph eggs open, at the alien bug chamber as these alien bugs are freely running around now or flying around as Isaac's body is laying there. And we just see like the alien, you know, goat just kind of like, you know, angrily is like, God damn it, I was supposed to be the one to escape, not these fucking flies. But, you know, he just kind of angrily looks into the glass and just like the glass fogs up as his breath and from his nose starts just like, you know, and it just fogs up the glass and you're just like, oh boy. So this goat in this Teocellus creature is getting real mad and angrily wants to be out of there as we cut to credits on episode 6, and credits play as Keep Away by Godsmack plays, which was a pretty, you know, heavy metal banger of a song to play while we're looking at that angry goat face with the half eyeball, you know, like crazy. But so this episode was definitely called The Fly because it introduced us to yet another one of those creatures. So now it's the xenomorphs, the blood-sucking tick motherfuckers that we learned of last episode, and also we saw earlier in the season where the guys went into his neck and like filled up like a giant blood sac, like a mosquito or something. But, you know, we got the xenomorph, the blood-sucking insect things, and then we have the Teocellus eyeball octopus looking thing. And now we have the fly creatures. But we know that there's 5 creatures. So there's still one more creature that's going to be shown within these last 2 episodes. I have a feeling it looks like an alien bee or something like that. But if it's not, maybe it's a fucking predator. I don't know. I would like it to be a predator, but it's probably not going to be. But there is one more alien species we have not seen. So 2 more episodes remaining. Maybe we'll get to see those. But the preview for next week looks absolutely insane, and I have the trailer for it here.
Will you help me?
We have to go. We're not safe here. I don't think we ever were.
Someone turned their trackers off. So you tell me how you don't know anything about this.
What did you do?
FX's Alien Earth.
So it seems that Wendy is ready to get up out of there, and she's saying, like, I don't think we were ever safe. We got to get the fuck out of here. But we also see Slightly is like talking to Shmi and shows Shmi that he's got Dr. Arthur with this face hugger under his bed. But then we also see shots of him dragging in like water on like this raft, like with the body floating as they're dragging this body along through this water, you know, probably trying to meet up with Morrow or something. But, you know, so the doctor's definitely still got the face hugger on him, and, you know, he's going to be trying to get to Morrow, but a xenomorph chest burster is probably going to burst out of his chest, so there's going to be 2 xenomorphs to worry about, because there's still the one in the cell. And it looks like Joe is maybe trying to escape with Wendy, and Wendy's maybe trying to bring everybody to escape, and they're all trying to get out of there, and Arthur had turned off the trackers, so Boy Cavalier is questioning the female doctor, like, how do you not have anything to do with this? And she doesn't, but maybe she does. You know, maybe next episode she helps them a little bit or something. But as far as we know, there's a chest burster in Arthur. They're going to be maybe getting loose next week. So, I don't know. 2 episodes remaining. I'm very excited to see how this ends and, you know, what happens. Will the T. Ocellus and that goat creature get out and get loose again? And do you think my theory is correct that this season ends with a nuke going off and them having to contain the outbreak of these alien species, and Prodigy will be no more and Neverland Island will be no more as they blow it to Kingdom Come and saving Earth from this alien outbreak until, you know, a future alien movie when we head back to Earth. But all of the alien projects in the future are set very, very far in the future. But you gotta think back in the 1950s and 60s, they thought by the year 2020 we would be flying cars and all this bullshit and crazy shit. Instead, we're killing each other still, and it's all about cell phones, you know, whatever. The world is a fucked up place, and things are not advancing as much as they thought they might. You know, way back in the day, they were like drawing these futuristic designs and flying cars and flying buildings and spaceships and space travel and people living on Mars and all this shit. We, you know, like, we're close. We're not there yet, but we're getting there. But we're not that close, you know. Everything's still about making money and cell phones and blah, 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 whatever. But Alien Earth has been really good for the last 6 weeks. I've been really enjoying it. The cast has been really good. I mean, I can't wait for these last 2 weeks. I got to figure out if Wendy survives and Joe. I really hope nothing happens to them. I hope Boy Cavalier gets brutally murdered. I hope Morrow gets murdered as well, but I hope Kirsch doesn't. I hope Kirsch sticks around, and I hope Wendy and Joe survive. But the rest of them can die. I'm not too, you know, attached to the rest of them. You know, so if we need some, like, you know, stakes, or like, we need to kill somebody so it feels like people can die at this moment. So, you know, if you gotta wipe out a few folks, you still got some targets in there. You got Curly, you got, you know, Slightly, you got Shmi, you got Morrow, you got all these people that can still die that I don't really care about, that I'll be like, okay, cool. But if Joe or Wendy or Kirsch dies, I'm gonna be very, very upset. I mean, if Slightly or Shmi dies, I'll be like sad, but I won't be like, oh no, my favorite characters died, you know what I mean? But so far, through 6, I've been really enjoying it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Alien Earth down in the comment section below, or if you'd like to message me on my other social medias, links for those down in the description below. Big Cam, 2 G's in the Big, pretty much anywhere. Look for this face and you'll find me. And let's chat more Alien Earth. I can't wait to do that with y'all. And if you've made it this far and you would like to support the channel, the best way to do that is liking this video, commenting down in the comment section below, subscribing if you haven't already, and make sure you hit that bell so you don't miss future Alien Earth videos and you get the notifications when those breakdowns come out. And once again, my name is Big Cam. Thank you guys so much for coming on by, and I will see you beautiful people in the next one. Peace!